Hello. Hello. Thank you for everybody's patience. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, my name is Wendy Lamb, and I will be your MC. And it's my pleasure to welcome you back to the Inclusive Leadership Conference. So, for today's afternoon session, we are going to be talking about performative allyship and when sharing social media posts aren't enough. So, can I see in the comments section some virtual noise? I want to see some excitement. You know, are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, yeah, I like it. That's what I like to see. You know, it'll be a little bit louder in person. So I mean, I can hear you. I swear, I really can. Okay, I like it. All right, so we are more than excited to welcome our breakout session speakers, Sierra McNeil and Quianna Daniel Smart. Okay, so to give you all more insight about our presenters today, Sierra McNeil earned her Master of Social Work from the Temple University School of Social Work. Be cool. During her time at Temple, she served as the MSW student rep for NASW Executive Board, a student in the International and Global Social Work Program, as well as reinstituted the student chapter for Association of Black Social Workers. Early in her career, she has worked various jobs with children and adolescents, including but not limited to TSS, Specialized Case Management, CYF, and JPO. Sierra currently serves as a coordinator at Family Resource Network, where she works with her family members of loved in the behavioral system. She trains providers on the importance of family inclusion in the recovery process for adults in the behavioral health system. And additionally, Sierra sits on the board of directors as a member at large and the chair for the Social Justice Committee for the NSW-PA, where she has instituted a peer support group for Black female social workers, drafted position statements in response to current social justice movements as well. The next presenter we have speaker, founder, author, and lifelong learner. Oh, I like that. Quianna Daniel Smart. She is an individual determined to lift others up as she climbs. Quianna is not only an integral part of her community in Philly, but a key asset to the many organizations that she is currently affiliated with. Quianna is a graduate of Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, earning her master's degree in social work with emphasis on trauma-informed care. In her current role, Quianna works as an integrative medicine therapist, where she provides individual therapy to adults diagnosed with substance use disorder. Quianna is also an executive director for a grassroots nonprofit organization where she and her team focus on a broader social welfare policies that impact Black women who identify as non-traditional students and adult learners for underrepresented communities. So how about our presenters, y'all? Yeah. Somebody said superficial actions and words that do nothing more than to make the performative activists feel good. A whole lot of nothing but a slap to the face of any Black and brown activists. A lot of exclamation points. Being accountable. Yeah. Thumbs up. Yeah, I like that. So I will not hold y'all any longer. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sierra McNeil and Quianna Daniel Smart.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. That was probably one of the best intros I have received in doing presentations. So I definitely want to say thank you for bringing all the energy, especially because it's over, the computer screen and it's hard to kind of be a little bit engaging. So I definitely want to give a round of applause to Wendy. So if everyone could give a thumbs up or claps to Wendy for, making it so energetic. So we are super excited to present this to you. Quianna and I had worked on this last year and presented this at a statewide conference for National Association of Social Workers. So we're happy to kind of bring this and branch it out to students. And so I hope you guys enjoy our presentation today. So we are going to get started. So Quianna, if you would like to go to, yep. So we are going to talk about some trigger warnings. So today we'll be talking about getting uncomfortable and promoting change, which means we're going to be having a lot of conversations about things that will make you uncomfortable. And so the true social worker and us challenge you to kind of sit with that emotion, recognize what's going on, and try and understand why you were feeling that emotion. Because again, if we are going to learn, we have to understand how to kind of sit with what we're going through, understand it, so that way we can figure out ways to kind of develop and kind of move forward. This space is for constructive learning. So again, we do not want anyone to be malicious. We appreciate great questions and great comments. We just want to make sure that we are doing kind of promoting constructive learning at this time. Be open, respectful, and again, let's have a fun time kind of becoming true allies. And also remember that this is a safe space for everyone. Quianna, next slide. All right, Quianna, this is you.
Yep. So one of the things we want to get into is the conversation and just recognizing what is performative allyship, right? And so performative allyship happens when someone from a non-marginalized group professes support and solidarity with a marginalized group in a way that either isn't helpful or that actively harms that group. So for example, Sierra and I talked a lot about folks who post social media posts in regards to Black History Month and, you know, different months where there may be where they may have a special organization or something towards that effect. And so one of the things that Sierra and I wanted to really talk about today is making sure that we're not just posting about what is happening in the world, but actually being an active and engaged member in what's happening. And so that looks like more than just posting on social media. It looks like learning and engaging in conversation that may be difficult or tough to have.
All right. And so one of the things that we want to do is when we do this presentation, because most of the time we do have people who are white, we like to kind of put them in a mind frame to kind of help them understand the rest of this presentation. And so we talk about white privilege, and white privilege has several different definitions depending on who you speak to. And so we would like to have this activity to kind of put everyone in the mind frame. And so what it is, if you go to the next slide, Quianna, please. So there's going to be questions on the screen, and what you're going to do is you're just going to tally if you can answer yes to these. Because we started a little bit late, we are going to kind of run through these pretty quickly. So just try and read. But if we do move too fast, just let me know. But I'm going to give you guys time to kind of read through this. Again, tally if you can answer yes. So we're going to start with the first slide. And I'm not going to read them to you because that just takes too long. So if you could just read it, and then we'll move to the next slide. Okay, Quianna, next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please.
Give this one a couple seconds, Sierra. That one is the last one.
Oh, the last one, yeah.
Okay, I'll go to the next one.
Okay, next one.
Give this one a little bit longer too.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You ready?
Yep. I think that's the last one. Okay. All right. So if you were able to answer these questions, if you were able to answer all 16 as a yes, that means that you were closer to having privilege. And so what we want to do is kind of talk about what that is very briefly. And so if you notice, a lot of the questions were kind of just about your day-to-day thing, like relocation when you're looking for a house, about going to the store. And so the reason why we picked this activity and these questions specifically is because it touches upon what we mean by white privilege. White privilege doesn't mean that you never had any hardship in your life. white privilege means that you go throughout life and your race is not part of your hardships. And so that's why we specifically chose this activity. And that's why we specifically chose those questions, because we think it's a really good representation of what we mean by defining white privilege. So if you guys would like, just put in the comments. You don't have to put how many you tallied up, but just talk, if you want to put in the comments about what are some of your reactions, how do you feel about that? I answered this activity as well, and I think I only marked yes for two like and a half maybe. Quianna, do you?
Yeah, I think I was on the edge of 3, but wasn't really clear about whether or not I put it or not. So even that's privilege, right? Like if you like, do I really feel that way, or is that a real thing for me, or so more like 2.
Yeah, exactly. So we had someone here said I had a lot of no's. Yes. And again, this speaks to the privilege that some of us have when we're walking through this world. So, okay, Quianna, next slide.
Yep.
All right. So active allyship works through and within. So I actually did some research on this, and I found really good points of 3 things that we can discuss. And I think these are really great parts of starting to work on allyship. So awareness, this requires a level of self-examination and critical thinking that has to happen. And just to kind of give some context, so me and my friend, he identifies as queer. And I think I had made like a joke. And to me, again, my privilege in the situation is being a cisgendered female. I had made a joke, and he pulled me to the side and was like, hey, listen, this is why this joke is actually offensive to me as someone who identifies as queer. And we kind of talked about it. And so now I know how my words as a cisgendered female actually affect someone who identifies as queer. And I think that's important when we talk about allyship, is because I could have reacted and be like, you know what, that was a joke, like it's no big deal, but I didn't. I took the time, I sat, I listened to him, understood where he was coming from. And now it requires me to constantly think about my actions and my words when I am making jokes, even if it is a simple joke. But now I'm rethinking about that. And I think that's one of the main points when we are talking about allyship, is that you have to be able to look at yourself and do that self-examination. Also, never insert your own opinions and experiences. We rather you listen and learn. So if you ever have that conversation with someone and you come to tell them, I'm like, Quianna, listen, like, X, Y, and Z just happened to me. And her first thing is to say, oh, that happened to me, and explain her story, and sometimes that's good, because, you're trying to build that rapport with people. But at the same time, if you're being an ally, I don't need your opinions and your experiences. I kind of just need you to kind of sit and listen and kind of understand where I'm coming from. And do your own research and seek out relevant information. It is not my job as a Black female to educate you on things that you can look up. We work with people who have bachelor's, master's, PhDs, do research for a living, but they're constantly coming to us and saying, hey, can you help us with this, or help us, do some research on this? And it's like, I want you to do the research yourself. I want you to do the critical thinking yourself. And then if you have questions to kind of help promote that understanding, that's where you can come to me and have that conversation. Quianna, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to point out that as students, you're really in a unique position, because this is the opportune time to make mistakes, right? And to kind of figure out who you are in the world and what every other situation is. And so what I mean by that is this is the perfect time to make mistakes. So if you don't know something, you have the opportune time to ask questions, to really dive into the unknowing. Whereas if you are a practitioner or someone new into the field, and you make a comment that may be inappropriate, or say something that could be received as racist or anything like that, it's a little bit more difficult to try to walk through that path. But right now, I feel like if there are things that you don't know, this is the opportune time to kind of dig in, use your resources, and to make sure that you are not just being aware of your own privilege, but making sure that you're aware of your surroundings and the people that are around you, that you call your friends, your classmates, your cohort mates, because it's really important that you can do that self-awareness and that self-reflection, but also say, you know what, there are some areas that I may need to work on that I really don't understand. And so I'm willing to work through that. And so it's if it's a good thing if you can do that now and find that base now, because that'll help you moving forward when there comes times there are conversations that are difficult to have and you don't know how to have those discussions. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think a huge part of allyship that, which is why we kind of thought about doing this presentation, is action. So it's one thing to kind of say, you know, I'm an ally. There's one thing to kind of say, you know, I'm going to post, you know, I think in the summertime, it was like, we're going to black out our screens or our social media in solidarity. And while all those things are great because it does, it's about optics in those situations, once you complete the optics part, we need that action. So that action means using your power and influence to kind of to bring peers of different groups into these exclusive circles. So for example, if you are someone who is in executive management, or if you are someone who is just leading something and you are someone who is white, what are you doing in that position to make sure that you have different voices, to make sure that you have different groups represented at that table? Because again, these are circles that are, these are circles that are not necessarily made for, you know, Black and brown voices, you know, queer people to join these groups as well. So what are you doing to actually make sure that you bring in these people to the tables that were initially cut off for us? And then also integration. So you can bring someone to the table and have them sit there, but then what's the point of having them there if you're actually not going to use them? I have seen this in my own experience where I have been the token Black female for a majority of my life. And so I've always been brought to the table, but my input has never been integrated into the work. And so for me, that feels isolating because then I know that I'm a token person in that moment. And then my thing is like, I'm going to leave because my input is not value. So when you are bringing people in and including in them circles, make sure that you are also creating opportunities for them to actually have their input being heard. Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really want to call attention to the quote that's at the bottom of the screen. It says, you cannot be an expert in a struggle that is not your own. And so the whole point of this presentation and just allyship in general is that we are putting ourselves in a position to be hearers, right? And then to be doers. And so when we hear or we're listening to someone from a minority group or underrepresented or diverse identity come to us and say, I've had this experience, our job is not to go and say, oh, well, you know, I had this experience too, or to try and coach that person out of, you know, having that emotion around that experience. Our job is to really listen and to say, okay, how can I support you during this time? And I think it's really important to understand that active allyship, when you are working in that lens and that framework, that you're always constantly saying, okay, how can I support you? Because folks from underrepresented communities don't want to hear what you're going through and what you've experienced. They want to know where the support is and where can I be comfortable in letting my guard down and saying that, you know, there's an issue or concern that I have. So understanding your privilege, right? Being a person of privilege does not make you a bad or evil person. When we talk about someone that has white privilege, we're not saying that you're, you know, this evil person that, you know, because you walk the earth and you have this privilege. No, what we're saying is that recognize that you have this privilege that a lot of us don't have. And then how can you use that privilege to amplify those marginalized voices, right? Also, understanding that the level of privilege that you have, it comes with a level of vulnerability as well as accountability. You're always constantly looking at how can I do better? How can I be better? And how can I bring more individuals of diverse identities into these areas that I don't necessarily see them? And I can give you a perfect example. I had a client and a supervisor say to me, you know, well, we don't really see that as an issue, right? Black Lives Matter. We don't really, because we don't have any Black friends, right? And it almost felt to me like they were missing the human perspective, right? And so what I think when we talk about allyship and performative allyship, we want to make sure that we're looking at situations from a human perspective, not just from race, right? Because it's really important. A life is a life. It doesn't matter if it's Black, white, or those kind of things. And so I really want to get into the habit of people talking about and looking at situations from a humanistic perspective, because I think that's really important. Another thing is willingness to be uncomfortable and call out unjust actions or omissions in all spaces. And so I have a lot of friends who identify as white say to me, my family members, they believe certain things that I don't believe. And so being a ally really depends and really hones in on those skills of calling people out wherever you are. So it could be family members, it could be professors, and it could be friends, because it really goes beyond those social media posts. What are you doing in your private lives to amplify those voices? And are you really about the mission outside of those social media posts? Lastly, we want to reject discrimination and get used to being uncomfortable discussing race, racism, and other isms, and how these isms show up in the social work profession, not just in the social work profession, in the classroom, in the boardroom. We really have to get back to those conversations because it really matters, right? To some people, race doesn't matter, but it's involved in everything. White privilege is involved in everything. And so getting used to having those uncomfortable conversations can be able to propel you in a place where people don't just know that you're an ally through your social media posts. They know that you're an ally by the things that you do and the things that you say on a daily basis.
This is you too.
I'm sorry. Being an ally is a process. It is not an identity. Recognizing that you are not the center of everything. One of the key things about allyship is recognizing that there are people that are experiencing life on a whole nother scale than you. And so again, being able to have that self-reflection and say, how can I make sure that what I'm doing is supporting instead of hurting marginalized groups? All right. So the first thing is be an amplifier that works to ensure that marginalized voices are both heard and respected. Being an ally requires a level of responsibility. White privilege is used as a weapon and can be the difference between life or death for marginalized groups. Please do your research on that. I'm not going to talk to you about that. You are students, you have the capabilities to research that, but that is extremely important. Additionally, the characteristics of allies are the heart of social work. What is most key about this is recognize that our beloved profession is not free from systemic oppression. And so when we originally did this presentation, we were talking to social work professionals, but I want to say to you as students, recognizing that academia is not free of systemic oppression, recognizing that your families and our friend groups are not free from systemic oppression, right? And being able to call that out wherever we are is really true to who you are as an ally. Is this me too?
I think this one's you too. Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. So we can't see you all. So we're kind of like blindly doing this. So I do apologize. Okay. So allyship is social media. Recognizing that you are not the center of everything. We talked about that. Prioritizing anti-racism, even in closed social media groups and spaces. I'll give you a great example of this. I'm in several Facebook groups where, they're supposed to be closed to just specific members of that group. And within these groups, I see a lot of racist rhetoric. I see a lot of things that are being said, especially from folks who I've shared a classroom with. And I've had to call those people out, not on that particular platform, but through a phone call, through an email, and say, what you said about this particular group or what you did was really inappropriate. And sometimes people don't even understand the magnitude of the things that they say unless they are called out on it, right? And so we want to make sure that in our allyship outside of social media, that we are calling people out, not in an inappropriate way, but making sure that people understand, like, hey, what you said really has some negative connotations to that. And so that's something that I want to impress upon you all as well. Sharing content without actually demonstrating what the content is discussing. So like Sierra mentioned, there was this whole movement to do the blackout post, but folks were using that to amplify their personal businesses. And so that's not what it was for. It was to black out to make sure that people knew to spend money with Black businesses. And so that wasn't what was happening. And so when we're sharing social media posts, we have to be cognizant of where the post originated and what was the idea behind the post. And so making sure that we're not just blindly sharing things, okay? And then recognizing problematic behavior and not taking offense when someone challenges those beliefs. So here's the thing. Being an ally, like we said, requires a level of self-reflection, but it also requires accountability. And it also requires you to be a little bit humble. We don't know everything. And so when someone from a marginalized group comes to us and say, hey, this is what's impacted me, it is not our job to get offensive and say, oh my God, they're trying to attack me. What that person is trying to do is just expressing to you what they've experienced, what they're going through, and we don't have to take offense to it, right? What we can do is sit with it, sit in that uncomfortableness, think about how to move forward, right? And then figure out, okay, what did I learn from this conversation that I can add to my repertoire of learning and understanding? And then lastly, activism and allyship do not begin and end with a hashtag. I know with our conference today, we are talking about social media beyond a hashtag. And I think it's completely important that when we move throughout life, we continue to hone in on our skills of being an ally, because it doesn't stop. You never stop learning. And every day there is something new. And I think what's really important is that we continue to say to people, hey, I'm an ally. You can feel safe with me. I don't know everything. And what I don't know, I'll try to learn, and I'll try to respect your opinions about, what you say is true for you.
Okay, so until it's personal, it's not real. We actually added this in, so we feel like this is a little bit more important to kind of talk about. So NASW peer support group. So when I actually started that, it was the first peer support group that NASW Pennsylvania has had ever. And so it was specifically for Black female social workers. And unfortunately, we did have some white social workers who felt excluded. They felt like, why are Black female social workers getting special treatment? Why can I not join this group? And so they were actually planning to kind of disrupt the group and kind of show up. And so I went to the executive director and the president of NASW and said, listen, this is why you need to have this conversation with the white social workers, and this is why I shouldn't. If you want to be an ally, this is your time to kind of use, again, what we talk about, using their position and their influence and having this conversation and understanding why white social workers showing up to a peer support group for Black females is problematic in itself. And so she, sat and listened, and she said, listen, this is the first time I'm going to have a conversation like that. Is there any pointers? And I was more than happy to kind of help her with that, because one, I appreciated that she was honest. I appreciated that she said, I don't know kind of what are some things that we should talk about. And so we actually talked about that. And then she had the conversation with the social workers who were planning to disrupt it. So that is a perfect example of when we talk about taking your privilege, taking your influence and kind of using it to make sure that you are being an ally to underrepresented groups.
Absolutely. Sierra, I wanted to take a moment to look in the chat to see if there were questions, comments. I know we're moving a little fast.
Yeah, no. We don't have any questions, but we did have a couple comments. Okay. We had someone who said, I marked yes for majority. The pace is really quick. Sorry, I know the pace is really quick. We only have an hour. So we started late. So I do apologize. But if I did have more time, I probably would have checked more. Yeah, exactly. It's not surprising how much white privilege and just overall ignorance you see within a diverse community or even institution. Absolutely. Yep. And we see that all the time, especially being a social worker. A lot of times people think that automatically because you're a social worker that, you're not racist or you don't have the ideology of white supremacy. That's not true. Yep. That is not true at all. And we see it all the time within our workforce. So those are the only comments that we have.
Okay.
Black History Month. Again, this is one where I'm actually going to give the example. I am doing, Quianna and I had actually planned a panel for Black History Month that we were actually asked to do only 2 weeks ago. So again, these are organizations who talk about allyship and, being representation of, underrepresented groups, but you actually didn't even plan to do something for Black History Month. And now you're actually, coming to, Quianna and myself and saying, hey, listen, can you do something for Black History Month? So not only did you forget about it, you're now coming to the two people that you consider to be the tokens and asking them to help. That's not what we're looking for. If you are constantly doing allyship work, these are constantly conversations and things that you are talking about. Yep. Maternity leave. I don't know if you guys watch The View, but this is something that we always talk about. And this has to do with, race. This has to do with gender. This has to do with sexual orientation. Until that person, and we're speaking specifically till a person of privilege experience it, it's not an issue. So I brought up the Meghan McCain thing because, she's someone who strongly identifies with, being a Republican and a conservative, and she has a platform and she always talks about things. And now she actually had a baby, and she talks about how it's horrible that the USA doesn't have, or the US doesn't have maternity leave or paid maternity leave. Sorry. And so we see this a lot. We see this with privileged people who don't understand someone's struggle until it actually happens to them, and then it's an issue. And so this is kind of what we wanted to talk about. And if you guys have had experience like that, please write this in the comment. Again, we kind of want this to be a little interactive. So if you guys want to write things in the comments, or if you want to ask questions, please do.
Yeah. I just wanted to piggyback really quick on the Black History Month. Something that I think is really interesting is that every year for Black History Month, these organizations and companies come out with, different rhetoric around Black History Month and things like that. But I think one of the things that I really want to make apparent to people is that Black history is American history. And every time we separate that, we further perpetuate that ideology of it's this one situation that happened and it wasn't really that bad, but, let's give them a month to kind of celebrate, which is the shortest month of the year. And so one of the things that I just want to impress upon you all is that when we look at the history of America and we look at how it was built on the backs of African American and Native Americans. And so what I want to impress upon you is that when you hear this rhetoric, even from professors, because there are professors I know that do this as well, we want to make sure that we say, hey, listen, is there a way that we can integrate some minority voices into our curriculum? Is there a way to integrate textbooks and literature through minority voices, not just during Black History Month, but throughout the curriculum? And so I think we have the ability as students, and I'm saying we because I am a former student, you have the ability to kind of move the needle a little bit further by saying, how can we support this initiative in academia? And I think it's extremely important because when we're always getting the white lens and white perspective on things, it further blocks out the voices of marginalized folks.
Mm-hmm.
And as Lewis said, I'm sorry, was this you?
That's okay. Yeah, this is my favorite quote, and I also love John Lewis. But never ever be afraid to make some noise and get into trouble, necessary trouble. This is something that I constantly say when I'm in groups and I'm talking to people. There's a difference between, just trouble and good trouble. And so don't be afraid to kind of speak up and say things. I know in the beginning of my career, one thing that I always ran into, especially when it comes to imposter syndrome, is I would say something and then everyone around the room would either not react to it. And so I would be like, oh my gosh, did I just say something really dumb? Is it, that sort of thing? But as I continue to get in my career, what I realize is that I'm actually a little bit of, 5 steps ahead of the people that's in the room. And so I have to kind of bring myself back down and say, listen, okay, how do I take steps to make sure that everyone kind of understands what I'm saying and how this is actually beneficial? And so this is what I consider good and necessary trouble, because sometimes when you are speaking up, people will take that, my passion, especially being a Black woman, will take my passion and see it as something different. And it's not. I'm not being aggressive. I'm just very passionate about certain things. And I want you to kind of understand what I'm saying. So I always tell students, because I do a lot of different speaking engagements with students for different universities. And I always tell them, do not be afraid to speak up. If you are causing a ruckus, I know that's an old saying, but if you are causing some trouble, then you are doing the right thing. People need to be uncomfortable. And I say this all the time. And I know that all of you on here are not social workers, but you as a social worker, or if you're in the mental health field or whatever, if you are comfortable in your job, if you are not constantly being uncomfortable, then you're not doing it. This field is very uncomfortable. You're constantly going to run into things that are going to make you uncomfortable. Your job is to understand, why are you uncomfortable, work through that, and how can we better support those around us. Quianna?
Okay.
Okay, I think this is both of us on this slide. Okay, so what is our role? So I have a white supervisor, and she is really good at filling some of these roles. And so over the summer, where things were really at its highest point, with all the Black Lives Matter protests and kind of everything that was going on, she felt kind of some of the same emotions that I did, but she knew that in these moments that it was not about her. And that's something that we will touch on about centering around whiteness a little bit later. But she knew that these moments were not about her. And so one of the things that she always did really well was, listen, I will never understand your experience as a Black woman, but what can I do to support you? That is probably one of the most helpful things that you can do as a person of privilege. Because again, these situations, although you may identify with some of the emotions that Black and brown people are experiencing at this time, they are not necessarily about you because it's not about your whiteness right now. And so just asking, what can I do to support you, is probably one of the most helpful things that you can do in that moment. Go ahead, Quianna.
Yep. And then I was just going to say the second point to that is allowing individuals from underrepresented backgrounds tell their stories uninterrupted, right? And so that means not interjecting. That means, trying to rationalize why something did or didn't happen to them, or even if what they're saying, you just can't believe that it happened, right? Our role as allies is to listen and not compare stories. We're there as a support, like Sierra just explained. And then additionally, making sure that at the end of that, you're saying, okay, what do you need right now to feel supported, right? Like, how can I support you, as Sierra just said? And I know for me, I've always had white supervisors in the field. I've never had a supervisor who has looked like me. And so I make it a point to say to them, this is what I need from you in this moment. And as Sierra's pointed out, I didn't always used to do that because I was scared of the trope of, the angry Black woman, or coming off too strong, or my voice being too loud. But I recognized early on that I have to tell people what I need in order for them to support me. And so once I tell you what I need, the ball's now in your court to do what you say that you're able to do. And so as allies, when we ask that question, we need to make sure that we're able to support them. And if we can't, we need to say that too. Like, I don't understand and I don't know how to best support you, but I'm here. Right. And so I think that's really, really imperative when we talk about allyship. Go ahead, Sierra.
And then next, to allow individuals from underrepresented backgrounds tell their stories uninterrupted. I, again, have run into situations like this, again, working with white social workers, where I'm trying to explain to them my feelings about, kind of what are going on with current events. And, they're kind of stepping in and sharing their experience. And then again, this goes back to centering around the whiteness. I need to be able to tell my story without having, someone of privilege kind of come in and take over, because that's what the conversation usually happens. It's no longer about me, my vulnerability, and sharing my thoughts and feelings with you. It now becomes, what are you experiencing? What are you going through? And how bad you feel? And like, that's not what the conversation is about. So if you are a person of privilege, we usually talk about having these conversations with people from different backgrounds and just letting them be able to kind of share their stories. Another big thing is being a change agent on social media, but complacent at work. I see this all the time in institutions. I see this in my workplace. I see this just in general. I have seen people post things on social media, but then at work, I have seen them, do things that kind of hurt underrepresented groups, specifically Black and brown children, where, whether they're giving them a high diagnosis, which is something that's huge in the Black and brown community, whether it's, kind of saying like, well, they don't deserve this because of X, Y, and Z. So there's a disconnect when it comes to people saying, yes, I want to fight for Black Lives Matter, and posting things on social media, but then at work, you're kind of doing something that's actually hurting Black and brown people. And so I do a lot of work with my colleagues on trying to help them understand that disconnect and how that's actually harmful. Quianna, I didn't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, and just to that point about being complacent at work, we're not just talking about being complacent at work, we're talking about being complacent at home.
Oh, Quianna, your screen. Quianna, can you hear us? Your screen froze. Quianna. Okay, so I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna text her and hopefully she can come back on. So again, as we mentioned, we kind of did this presentation for social workers before. And so social workers actually have a code of ethics. And in our code of ethics, it actually addresses these things. And so we talked about how as a social worker, there's a level of trust that is dissolved when things are posted on social media that is actually not aligned with our code of ethics. And so we constantly see this kind of going back to what I just explained, when we talk about, putting one thing on social media and then not necessarily doing that same thing in the workplace. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to actually pull my screen up because it looks like Quianna was kicked out. Gotta love technology, guys, right? Let's see. So can you guys see my screen? Oh, Quianna, you're back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kicked me out for some reason. I'm not exactly sure what happened.
Okay. Can you pull back up?
Yes, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second.
So I'm just going to go in the comments while you're doing that and kind of read some of the ones that happen. So Brandy says, I've been trying my best to share Black history with my college community by posting different Black leaders and their backgrounds each day through my school's student government Instagram page. This is awesome. And the reason why this is awesome is because everyone learns about the typical 5 Black people when we talk about Black History Month, whether it's Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther, Malcolm X. And so I think this is really good to kind of start branching out and saying, listen, there's so much more Black history that a lot of us don't know about. And I think this is a great kind of starting point to kind of point that out there. Then we have another student says, I'm working on a similar project for the organization that I'm interning with. And then she says, feel free to connect with her. Great. I'm glad to see that you guys are kind of utilizing these platforms. Often I've seen Black and brown folks speaking on their experiences and feelings on certain traumas, and white folks respond with some level of envy for that trauma. We will address that soon too. How should someone address this, and how can we combat that envy and the white folks around us? So it's interesting that you use the word envy. And so I'm going to wait because we actually do address this later in the presentation. So I don't want to kind of skip ahead. And then another comment is, I have planned a Black alumni virtual networking event for my college department to highlight the accomplishments of our former students. Excellent. All these things are great, and I believe that all these things are needed. And I'm actually happy to kind of start seeing a lot of this stuff. If 2020 has brought us anything, it has kind of awoken the U.S. as a whole. Honestly, the last 4 years have kind of awoken the U.S. as a whole. But I think 2020 has really kind of burst the bubble that we have been living in. And so I'm kind of glad to kind of start seeing like all of these things happening. And to address the one comment on envy. So the reason why I said it's interesting that you use the word envy is because I would use a different word. And so to speak to this, what I usually, when I'm having these conversations and then I'm usually interrupted by, another white colleague, I ask them, why do you want to be oppressed so badly? Like, what is it that you feel like you need to be oppressed so badly? Because that's kind of what it is. They want to feel like they're being oppressed because they have this feeling of being left out. And it's like, honey, if you want to be oppressed, like, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but this is not the conversation for that. And so getting, the oppression Olympics is draining. Absolutely.
It's beyond draining because you see it. It's beyond draining because you'll see it in professionals who've been in the field for 10, 15 plus years, and I'm sure have worked with other marginalized identities. And so when it's like when I first got into the field, I'm like, are they serious? But in fact, they are very serious. And so I've gotten to the point where I just have to call people out because you can't work in an environment like that. It's very suffocating. And so making sure that again telling people what I need and telling how people how rude and inappropriate those comments are. It kind of makes me stronger in the end because I'm able to stand up for myself. Because let's just face it, sometimes if you are someone who identifies in a marginalized group, there may not be another one of you. You may be the only one. And so to kind of prevent myself from feeling that burnout and that all of the things that come with that, I try to make sure that I do have to stand up for myself.
Absolutely. And this kind of brings us to our next point of getting uncomfortable with yourself and others. And so we posed two questions to the group. If you're not willing to give up your privilege, are you really an ally? And I think this is probably one of the biggest questions that we ask for everyone, not just white people, but again, going back to the comment that I had mentioned earlier, where my friend who identifies as queer had, called me out on me telling a joke. So my privilege of being a cisgendered female, being able to tell that joke and not really understanding, how that affects someone, I have to, if I'm going to be a true ally, I now have to give up, telling these jokes or saying these comments and really looking at how my words affects people. Also, can you provide an example of a time when you had to get uncomfortable? And if you guys want to just answer these in the chat, that's perfectly fine. Quianna, I didn't know if you want to add anything.
Yep, I sure do. I think that one of the things we have to always keep in mind is that learning doesn't ever stop. Racism, it and all the other isms are constantly evolving, right? They're always around. And so the moment that we let our guard down and we're not reading up on different things and we're not getting uncomfortable is the moment that we fail in our allyship towards different groups. And so I think it's really important. If you don't know something, say that I don't know, but I am willing to learn. And I think that is that level of vulnerability that has to happen when you're actively seeking to be an ally. Again, going beyond those social media posts, because if somebody asks you, in real life, hey, do you really believe what you post? And depending on who it is, your answer may change. But I think that if you're an ally, you'll stay steadfast in what you believe in. And, being in that uncomfortableness is really important.
Absolutely. I just want to go to the chat. It says, I send weekly activities to my coworkers on different world celebrations and heroes to do with their families. I add resources as music, books, and videos. Awesome. We'll talk about, that's awesome. We have a few things that we will give to you guys as far as like resources. I don't know if you guys have access to this PowerPoint, but we do have several pages of resources that we give out. And I think that's awesome that you kind of do that.
I was also going to say too, Sierra, I do want to, first of all, just commend everyone for being a part of this conversation. This is not an easy conversation because it's a lot of self-reflection that has to happen. And because we're in a virtual space, it's a little bit difficult to kind of sit in that uncomfortableness by yourself. So I just want to commend everybody for one, even being a part of this conversation. But two, if you are doing the work like the one individual just said, they're giving out different things every day for folks to do with their families. I really am so glad to hear that because that just signals to me that you are doing some of that work that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And then the last comment was, so Alyssa had talked about the oppression Olympics is draining. And then we had a comment that says, that's a great point, Alyssa. I have found myself struggling with other marginalized groups asking why we aren't having deep conversations about other oppressions during the racial justices of 2020.
Right.
Yes. Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things you have to remember, especially for folks in marginalized groups so let's just take Black Lives Matter and the police brutality, right? It's a little bit difficult. I'll just speak from my experience. It was very difficult for me to pay any attention to the other injustices that was happening in regards to the other isms, because that was so much in my face. That was so much my reality. And so I can only imagine what it's like for people who don't experience who don't identify with a marginalized background and how it's easy to ignore things that are not in your face and that you have been impacted by. So what I will say again, being an ally is not saying that you know everything or that you know everything about a particular group. It's constantly learning and relearning. And so that's what I have to do. I am not an expert when it comes to LGBT. I am not an expert when it comes to trans lives. But you know what I do? When I do see something that resonates with me, even if it doesn't, somebody brings something to me and they have questions, I research it, right? And that's part of what Sierra talked about before, is that whole research and making sure that you're informing yourself about what's happening and how you can support that. And so maybe you can't have the hard conversation, but you can donate money. You can share the post, but then in class, you can say to your professor, okay, you know, this is a particular group that's being impacted by what we're talking about now, right? So bringing up current events. So there's different ways that you can go about supporting different marginalized groups that are being oppressed at different times. You don't have to be an expert on everything, but you do have to be willing to learn and relearn all the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's not much to add to it. You said it perfectly. So we're gonna move along. So having hard conversations. We created this because I think a lot of people, we're all learning, right? We're all trying to figure this out. Even being a Black female for the past 32 years, I still don't know everything, and so I'm still having hard conversations within my own community as well as people with outside of my community. So we kind of wanted to help you guys and just give you a very brief guideline of having these conversations. And so confronting people in your circle is a lot harder than having conversations with people outside of your circle. And I had said this to a group when we did this presentation. Someone was like, well, what if I lose that relationship with my mom or my sister or my whatever? And I say, and this is a very tough and uncomfortable thing that I'm about to say, but are you really willing to have that person in your life if they disagree on the fundamentals of human rights? And so there's a difference if we talk about, pepperoni pizza versus pineapple on pizza. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about my life mattering and having a conversation and someone in my circle saying it does not matter. I don't need you in my life. I am perfectly okay with losing you and losing that relationship if you and I do not agree on the fundamentals of human rights and my core values as a person.
Yep.
And so you have to go in these conversations and prepare yourself that when you walk away, you may lose that relationship with that person and kind of have to deal with that. And that's a very tough thing for some people, especially if you're like me, who has a small circle. And I have a small circle because I've had these hard conversations with people. And I realize that, hey, listen, you and I actually don't agree on the very fundamentals of my core values. So I'm actually going to stop this relationship with you.
Yep.
And so prepare yourself for having those conversations, and then also prepare yourself for the outcome of that conversation may not be what you want. Dump the assumptions. Quianna and I do this a lot. We speak a lot about different things, and Quianna's like, nope, Sierra, that's your bias, show it. And I love it because I need someone to kind of call me out on that and say, like, that's your bias showing. So don't go into these conversations already having assumptions. Stay on the same level. This is really hard, especially if you're someone that takes things emotionally. I've been able to have these conversations for a long time, so I'm able to kind of disconnect my emotions from them. Not all the time, but majority of the time. But so making sure that you stay on the same level, being respectful, name calling, all that kind of stuff, that's not going to be helpful when you're having these conversations. Be clear and use specific example. I am such a person that will say, show me where you got that from, show me where your data source is, because for me, I'm like a person that I need to see the evidence backing what you're saying, because we all know I can't fight with emotion. That's your emotion. What you feel is what you feel. I cannot invalidate that and say, that's not how you should feel. That's not what I can do. But if you come to me and say, look at this source, then you and I can kind of have a conversation about the source and how that information is being presented. Never walk away. As tough as the conversation may get, never walk away. Now, this gets a little tricky, right? Because you don't want to be in a situation that's going to cause a little bit more stress and also cause you to possibly, relive a trauma or something like that. So you have to know when that conversation is okay and when you can walk away. I'm really good at saying, you know what, this conversation is getting to a point where you and I are no longer having a helpful conversation, a conversation that's promoting learning. So how about we step away and then come back to this later? And then also always take responsibility for your role and your emotions. Quianna?
Yep. So I don't have anything to add because we are out of time. It is 1:16. But if anyone wants to ask any questions, if you want our PowerPoint, how does that work? Will we be able to give it to them, or will Temple give it?
Go ahead. Wendy. Yes, Wendy, thank you for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you for such a great session. I know personally, before I post something on social media, I take a few moments, like, what am I putting out into the virtual space? Like, am I reading the room? And even then, it's for those that don't really post on social media, what are you doing behind the screen? Whether it be in a virtual space, in person with your friends, or even like contributing money, like you all mentioned earlier. So yeah, so the Inclusive Leadership Conference would love to know your takeaways and what y'all thought as well. And you can actually do this by rating the session below. Any feedback and insights is always helpful to us at ILC, Sierra, and Quianna. So I want to see some clapping emojis in the chat, because
Wendy, I love your energy.
Yes. So I'm gonna make some virtual noise. I can hear it, I swear. I can really hear it. So yeah, thank you all so much. Don't forget to participate in the games and post on the wall to earn prizes. I heard a rumor that you won't want to miss them. So yeah, also don't forget to follow us on social media at TU Leadership, at Temple Diversity, and at Klein Go. So that concludes our session. Please make sure you meet us later today for our last session at 1:30, Embodied Truth, Closing the Gap Between Aspiration and Liberated Living with Monet Roberts. And thank you all so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.